Welcome to If Testimony Was a Person, presented by Help to Adjust Inc. Today we have a special guest. This is a person that is part of the field of mental health, is part of reform and community-minded thinking to advance people as a whole. Chaka Phaire is an LCSW-R, the highest designation of clinical social worker in New York, and much more. Welcome, Chaka.
Thank you so much for having me, Don. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure. And, when I think about your history, I think of a person that has come a long way, like we all have. But you, in particular, grew up in first the Bronx, then went to college at Stony Brook University, then spent some time in Brooklyn, and start with talking about the life that you experienced before college.
My life was pretty difficult. I lived in the inner cities from the projects. We moved from the projects to a tenement, and the tenement was actually worse than the projects because at least with the projects you have heat and hot water that's included. And a tenement, there is no heat and hot water included. The boiler was often broken. There was not heat in the house. Hot water, we had to boil hot water. There were times we had to sleep with our coats on, take a shower the night before so that we can get warm as we slept because the temperature outside was too cold. We would be able to see our breath inside. We collected bottles and cans to eat. So there was a significant need. And that was a very poignant time in my life. It might have been like 2 or 3 years. But, when I think back to my childhood, that's what I think back to. And that's where a lot of the motivation comes from for me to do the things that I do now.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, the story of your going to Stony Brook and how it came about is a very, I think, inspirational in its own right story because there's restrictions and barriers based on documentation that gets in the way sometime of young people. I was a school guidance counselor myself. I know that sometimes nothing can happen unless you have documentation of this or that, especially in terms of going to college. Give me that story.
Certainly. First off, before I tell a story, there is a line in Wu Tang where they say, "Life is a shorty, shouldn't be so rough." And that was something that I felt on a everyday basis. I knew that people had it hard, but I also knew that somehow I had it more difficult. My mother is from Haiti, and in Haiti, if you don't work, you don't eat. My parents divorced, and it was alleged that my father told my mother that if you aren't gonna ever be anything without me. So my mother sought to prove what he said untrue at all costs, and for a certain portion of that, we were the casualties. So she didn't seek any public assistance or any other the other opportunities that there are afforded here. In fact, we didn't find out about soup kitchens and some other things till later on in life. All we knew was public assistance, which we begged her to go on. And she wouldn't necessarily go on it because she felt like she was trading her pride for pennies. So things would get so difficult that we would beg her to go on it. and she would go on it for a little while. They would run her around, run her ragged, only to give her, a small amount of the effort that she put in terms of reward. So she would always get off.
Let me just say this quick thing. The movies of the 1970s, some of what was known as blaxploitation movies, often gave this picture of the caseworker being the ruler of the universe for black families, because this person could come to your house and, based on what they wrote, could have your benefits reduced, stopped. Anything could happen. So you had to make sure to say and do all the right things. So that just rings bells when you talk about that.
Yeah, and oftentimes social workers get misaligned with caseworkers.
Absolutely.
So in the black community, I have to explain to people I'm a social worker, not a case worker.
Right.
But yeah, you are 100% correct. They basically start and stop the world at their own volition, and they don't appear to be beholden to a whole lot. Or put it this way, I can't even say that. Let me just take that back. I can say that that was the case with my family. With this particular caseworker, she acted like she was God Almighty. And what she did is, after I graduated high school, which was a very scary day for me because I didn't know what the future would entail. I knew that no matter what happened, I wasn't staying around my neighborhood, because I saw what happened to young men in my neighborhood. They either went to jail or they died. I didn't have a whole lot of experience with people who were successful because they would even move away. But I just realized that the inner city was going to devour me if I didn't do something different. So I was prepared to go to the Army. I was prepared to do whatever I needed to do to get out of this place, because I knew that the future was not going to be promising. So after I graduated high school, I was a gifted student, and I had a few colleges that were at my disposal. But each one of them asked me for the paperwork, the documentation for your financial, and I wasn't able to produce that. So there was one school that was just like, well, just come. We'll deal with that when you get here. And the person who actually said that was a brother by the name of James Noble up at Stony Brook University.
Yeah.
So he said, just come. We'll deal with all of that later.
Shout out to Stony Brook University, who has some of my best friends who are progressive people who attended there.
So went to the school, and each time they would ask me the question, I would come up with a different excuse until one guidance counselor cornered me on it. And I explained to her that this particular caseworker is acting like she's God Almighty, hanging up the phone, doing all kinds of completely unprofessional things. And I could not produce the documentation that would allow me to stay there because I couldn't get through her.
Yeah.
So this guidance counselor, Rebecca Paz, asked me for her number. And when she got the number, she called this woman and she read her the riot act. And, I couldn't believe that the caseworker stayed silent enough to hear anything, because that wasn't my interaction with her. She overtalked you. She hung up the phone. She yelled at you. She screamed, cursed. Whatever it is that she did not do to her. Mm-hmm. And Ms. Paz said, well, if you don't have this paperwork on my desk by Monday, we're going to have a problem. And, that was one of those times, where something is about to happen. So you're sitting there like, oh, gosh, something big is going to happen. And you're nervous, and you have that nervous energy. And by Monday, that paperwork was there.
It's almost like a representation of what happens in the hood when you have to go to somebody more powerful to get something done. Rebecca called this person and said, look, this is what has to happen. and then it happened.
Yeah, this was a giant in my life, and only to see that there was someone who was able to go up against that giant, made me feel cared for and made me feel advocated because I went to so many people and no one could give me the answer for how to
See
get
that?
this person to do what they were hired to do.
Right.
So, I've always had a very soft spot for injustice, but I never had the power to really change that situation. And I watched, Miss Paz, and I said, you know what? That's what I want. I want the ability to make sure that I can speak for the underserved and make change, substantive change in a person's life.
Mm-hmm.
So that became something that I certainly took note of. And, that's really one of the ways that I came into the field of social work.
I have to admire the fact that you were inspired by someone who was able to do something to change another person's life, in this case yours, because often young people are inspired by money or inspired by the power to take money and do what's looked at as enjoyable things, but sometimes even destructive things. But you coming from the environment that you did, someone being able to bring positive change inspired you, and that kind of took you to the path of social work.
Yeah, well, I don't want to seem like I'm holier than thou because I lived in the hood and I watched all of the attractions of the hood. So I watched the brothers with the Benzes and the BMWs and the rope chains and the girls and everything else. And one of the things that I saw is I saw these people with what I consider to be tremendous money. I watch people get settlements from court cases, jumping out of cabs and popping bottles and going here and doing these things. And then the next year they were broke. The next year they were right at the point that we were all at.
Right.
And, I said, that how is this possible? How do you get, at that time in 1986, $24,000 was a lot. So we had people who were awarded like $24,000 from a settlement, and the next year they were broke.
Yeah.
And I said, well, see, you let me get some of that money, and I guarantee you I won't be broke ever again.
Mm-hmm.
So that also helped to fuel that me answering that question. I had a friend of mine, his father said, what would you do with $1 million? And for the first time, that let me know because, like I said, I'm pretty gifted. So, I said, well, the fact that you're asking me this question means that there is a prescribed way of doing something with this $1 million. So even he wasn't able to answer the question, but it still started this lifelong pursuit with what you need to do with your money so that you can continue to make more money. So, those two things at the same time, I think really speak to a lot of the things that I'm doing and am able to do is because I look to answer those questions from my upbringing. So, what to do with $1 million and, how to help people. I believe in limitless living. So everything that I do is about inspiring people and helping people in a tangible way. The methods may look different. So the way it happens might look different, but it's all the same. It's all inspiring people and trying to get them to get better than they currently have and to really move into their space of greatness.
Yeah. So speaking of money, financial stuff, you worked on would this be the Upper West Side um, during college years?
Yeah, high school and college.
High school and college years, the famous Thomas Pharmacy.
Yes.
And tell me what you were exposed to there.
Well, at Thomas Pharmacy, that is right across the street from ABC Studios on Columbus Street. and we were exposed to celebrities. We were exposed to wealthy people,
Yeah.
and that to me was a tale of two cities because I was living in a place where there was not that wealth. And, as I was walking by the stores to make these deliveries, I would see people eating these $100 dinners and didn't seem to have a care in the world. And I thought about what $100 would do for me and my family.
Right. And by the way, $100 in 1990 is probably equivalent to $280 or so now.
Yeah.
So somebody eating $100 dinner had obviously was a prominent person, or at least had money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would also go and do deliveries to celebrities, and if the celebrities at that time didn't have the proper change, or if they didn't have their cash out, they would invite me into their homes, and they would go and get the money, and then they would give to me. It gave me a chance to literally look out of their window, both literally and figuratively. So I'm on Central Park West, and I'm seeing these wonderful views of New York City that you only see on television, but I'm seeing these things live. I'm seeing people that you only see on television. I'm getting an opportunity to speak to them and conduct conversation and everything else with them. So, that was, like I said, a tale of two cities, and let me know that this is going on in this part of the town, this is going on in this part of the town. Which one would, if you could choose, which one would you choose?
Yeah.
So I said, well, look, I definitely want to choose a level where my needs are being met. Being rich or whatever the case may be, that's immaterial to me. What's most important is impacting people's lives.
So by 1995, you get your master's in social work, and where do you go from there?
Well, at that point in time, I was working at Children and Family Mental Health Services out in Amityville. And the person, my supervisor, was really happy for me. And, I told her I was going to go start my own business. So she said, well, have you ever taken an entrepreneur class? And I said, no. So she said, well, perhaps you will need to take an entrepreneur class. So I went to go and try to take an entrepreneur class. So I went back to Stony Brook University, Avril Harriman School of Business, and they looked at my credentials and said, well, listen, you already have a master's. Instead of you taking an entrepreneur class, why don't you just get a whole nother degree in a year and a half through our accelerated program? So I said, okay, no problem. So, I ended up graduating with a master's in management and policy as well. So in 96, I had two master's degrees, which at that time was, now it's commonplace, but back then that was kind of like pioneering a new place. But I remember people saying to me, "Wait a minute, you got an MSW and you got a degree in business. What you gonna do with that?" And I said, "Well, you know what? In every business, you need money, and you need people. It's like I can do anything with it, and that's what I'm trying to do is just really trying to walk into my destiny, walk into, like I said, limitless living. It's like, people put people in these little boxes and compartments. So it's like, oh, you're a social worker, so you should only be doing this. Or you are this, so you should only be doing this. Well, no, I feel like I'm a child of God, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah, it really strikes me that when I was a graduate student, I really had, I think, very good training. My training is mental health counselor, which is different from social work but similar.
Yes.
It's the 60 credit masters.
Mm-hmm.
I, during graduate school, got no guidance in how to make money in this field. It was simply, You can be a school counselor, or you can be a alcohol abuse counselor. You can work for an organization as a caseworker. You can get a promotion and become assistant director or director. Didn't teach us anything about the possibility of our own practices or anything of the sort. And I think that's a shame.
It really is. And, I think about in college when I told one of my frat brothers, shout out to the brothers of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
Right.
But he said to me, "You graduating with an MSW, you trying to be broke all your life?"
Wow.
And I know that he meant well because he's a lawyer. In fact, he's doing pretty well as a lawyer. But, I think a lot of the times people lack creativity in terms of how to get the most out of their person, period. So whatever it is your gifts and talents are, the word says that we can make a sizable income. We're supposed to be wealthy. We're supposed to be wealthy, and we think that it's a degree that's going to make us wealthy. And I tell people all of the time, look, when you graduate college, that's the start of the hustle. Now you're on board. Now you can start to rack up some points.
It's just get you in the room, quote unquote.
That's all it does. That's all it does is it says, look, I mean something because somebody else says it. But I've meant something all my life. You just need this credentialing so that you can believe. But, these are things that they say all of the time. I knew that in this field, if you do want to, quote unquote, make a lot more money than other social workers, then you could go into research or could become a professor at a college or whatever the case. My thing was, I've said for the longest time, I'm rich. And I'm not rich because of my finance. I'm rich because I'm able to take care of my basic human needs. Every morning when I turn the shower on and the water's hot, that's rich. There's heat in the apartment, that's rich. I'm constantly reminded of those things.
There's a study that I often talk about that talks about happiness and money, and that money, the lack of money causes unhappiness. So if the things that you were talking about, if you can't heat your place, you don't have food, there's bills that are being unpaid, it's very stressful, and that will cause a level of unhappiness in itself. But that once you get to the level where you can pay all your bills and maybe even take a trip if you want, or have that $100 dinner, once you get there, money no longer actually brings additional happiness. After that, it's for you to find your way to more happiness, because money doesn't bring it except to make sure that you're all good in the way of Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah. There's in the movie Forrest Gump, there's a line where he says, my mama said that every man needs a certain amount to live and the rest is to show off. So, I think about that all the time, is that once your basic needs are met, then after that, it's no longer needing things for you to survive, but how big, instead of you needing a car to work, it's like, okay, how fancy the car? Instead of you needing a house for shelters, how big, how many rooms, how many this? So, there gets to a point where after your needs are met, then the rest is immaterial. So, a lot of the times that comes from an awareness, though.
Right.
And that's, I see that happen, especially in counseling is there are a lot of people that don't recognize that their basic needs are met, and they're always looking for this next shiny thing or things that there has to be more out of life, and don't recognize all that they already have. So gratitude is a huge part
That's big.
in everything. So, I thank God that I'm blessed with being blessed, but knowing that I'm blessed at the time I'm being blessed.
Metacognition,
Yes.
knowing that something is happening at the same time that it's happening is different from just having it happen.
Yeah.
So let me just say, so shout out to my own company, Help to Adjust Counseling. We've been doing this in Valley Stream for since 2010, and so it's been over a decade. And what you said rings true, that people who well, I'll say from my perspective, people who are very successful come in for counseling, and sometimes those are some of the lessons that they need to become clear on. Is that I am okay. I have enough. I am enough. That it's not, it's not necessarily because you are okay that you feel okay, and that's some of what I think counseling and therapy does for people who, you know, who do have a good amount, because a lot of times we assume that people who are coming in for therapy are people who, are out getting into fights in bars, and, they're just living this miserable life, and that's why they need counseling, so that they don't have some kind of breakdown. But on the contrary, we all can use an ear and a little professional feedback sometimes, because it can be very clarifying about our own values and thoughts, and it can be cleansing at the same time.
Absolutely. But our experience open up voids in our soul that a lot of the times we try to fill with material items. So I look at my own background and see that there were certain voids that will open up where I feel like, okay, I got to make money, I got to do this. And we get to a point where we start to make money, but it never becomes enough. So, whatever it is that you are trying to fill, whatever thing that you are trying to put into your soul to fill that void is not going to be enough, you know. And there has to, I believe that there's a space in your soul for God, and there's a space for men as well. We all are communal creatures. We need certain things from each other, but there's only a portion in our soul that only God can fit into. And a lot of the times we try to fill these things with cars and, material items, and we think that by the acquisition of these material items, then we're going to be okay.
That was
And
beautiful, man. That's a quotable. Our experiences create voids in our soul that we try to fill with material things. That is very profound.
to God be the glory.
So now, in our last few minutes, give us a little bit about the passion that you have for community work and some of the things that you've been doing, including your program with chess and black youngsters, etc.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, all of the things that I do are to encourage people and to get them to walk into their greatness. So, as a result of my background, it has sensitized me to the fact that there are people who don't have the things that we think that they have, and they're usually disguised among everyone. And if they're doing a really good job, you'll never know. So it's trying to reach back and to provide some meaningful experiences, or really hope. Hope is probably the most valuable commodity that we can give to someone in these situations, because if we have hope, then we know that a better day is coming, and all we have to do is wait until that better day comes. But if we have no hope, it's like, well, what's the point? you know? And then you have people who give up in various ways, you know, or they find ways to self-medicate and everything else. But getting back to the question that was asked, I provide work in soup kitchens. I do a lot of different work in the community spaces for people who I feel cannot speak, may not have the verbiage to articulate as clearly, and may not even know who to articulate their concerns to. So I look to try to be a voice for the voiceless and to provide hope for the hopeless. Chess program. I have a chess mentoring program, the Black Knight, where we teach the game of life through the game of chess. That came about through my counseling sessions, where you have the most challenging students in the school are usually the most intelligent, you know, and they also, I found, play chess. Now, when I would talk to them and tell them, well, listen, you have to be patient, you have to sacrifice, you have to have wait for things later on down the line, you know, that wouldn't mean anything. But if we're playing a game and I took their piece,
that's good.
I got their attention.
Yeah.
So I use the game of chess to really be a microcosm of life.
Absolutely.
And really to be a tangible representation of the words that I'm saying to them. So, you know, I had to find a way to speak to them in a language that they would understand.
So you were doing the sessions and the chess games simultaneously, or
Yes.
afterwards?
Yes. Play therapy.
Okay.
A child's play is a child's work.
That's right.
So if you engage a child in play, then that's where you can guide a lot of their thinking and let them see that there are certain mistakes that they might be making. And being that it's in a relaxed environment, they're prepared to hear what you have to say than a lecture.
Absolutely.
So, you know, it's almost like you're distracting them with fun and infusing seriousness. But
teaching you by accident.
Yes.
Like, I didn't mean to learn anything here.
Yes. But I believe that is something that is not just for children, it's for adults as well.
Passive
So I've always been a person who likes to have fun. And although I'm no longer in college or anything, that hasn't changed. I still enjoy a good time. You know, the ways that good time come out now might be different than it was back then, but there's still ways that you can still have fun and enjoy your life and still learn and still do some meaningful things. You know, serious work doesn't have to be serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so you can do some serious things, but have fun along the ways. I mean, this life is meant to be enjoyed. So we're to find out what our purpose is, and along the time and the finite span of time that we have, we're to enjoy that. So, you know, it's not all serious. I have a lot of fun.
Chaka, you are full of insights. I really appreciate the time. If people want to contact you or your mental health practice or your on your social media handles, give us those.
Okay, my social media handles in all Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they're all Chaka Phaire, Chaka. I'm sure you're gonna spell it out. Phaire. If you want to contact me for mental health services, that number is 718-304-1114.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Like, subscribe, hit that notification button to keep in contact with Help to Adjust and all of the content that we're putting out. Once again, Chaka, we appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.